and welcome to COPán Tae, a series of lunchtime conversations hosted by myself, Maeve for the Green Arts Department at Access Ballymun.
Okay, so it looks like we're underway. I might pass the mic over to you first if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm Nakai, I'm 17 and I'm in 5th year, and inside of school I do green schools and plastic out of the park. We have lots of plastic free initiatives in our school, and I do things outside of school like climate projects, for example the Rising Tide project, which was with Cracking Light. So I get involved in them outside of school, and then the climate protests as well I'd be involved in as well.
Wow, amazing. You're really busy. That's fantastic. I'm Eileen, I'm an artist and I lecture at Burren College of Art. We have a master's in art and ecology, which I started about 10 years ago. And it's been kind of slowly gaining momentum. And I think like yourself may be interested in ecology and eco arts action, things like that. Yeah, so I mean, it's nice. It's always better, I think, to meet in person, but it's nice to kind of connect with people that you wouldn't normally connect with otherwise. I live in Kildare, even though I teach out in the West, I live in Kildare. So I'm kind of busy in between a few different places.
Yeah, I'm in Dunleary, so it's very close to the coast.
Okay, nice. Have you gotten into sea swimming? Seems to be all the rage.
Last year, yeah, over lockdown, I would do it. There's been some problems there with like jellyfish and in our water, and the sewage as well. So
yeah. I think the jellyfish, like my understanding of like kind of big blooms of jellyfish is related to kind of emptier spaces in the ocean, which is kind of really frightening to be able to see that. So that kind of direct infestation, for lack of a better word, on the shores. No, I have dreams of being a sea swimmer, but it hasn't materialized yet, living more in the Midlands.
Yeah. No, it is really nice, and going out in all weather.
Yeah, it kind of builds a set like a resilience, I think, or like kind of, kind of fortifies you and your spirit first thing in the day or at the end of the day. It's lovely day. Right. So maybe we should jump into the reading, kind of start there. We had the two readings that were sent over by Maeve. I think the first one, maybe for anyone in the audience who hasn't seen the book. The introduction by Greta Thunberg, the most effective way to get out of this mess is to educate ourselves. And then the second one by Kate Rayworth, Towards a 1.5C Lifestyle. Where would you like to begin?
Maybe with the Greta Thunberg introduction.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah. Well, I've read her book. It's No One's Too Small to Make a Difference, and it's a collection of her speeches, and that is really interesting. And they were all at different events that she was making them, and I really like this one as well. And it brought up she brings up the point again and again that it's like interconnectedness, and that you can't push the blame onto either the market or the government or the people or the car companies or any single thing, because it's everything is connected and everything has an impact on the other things. If there's still people in demand, there will always be a demand for a product. So I really like that point, that change has to come from all sides and all aspects.
No, I totally agree. I was listening to this podcast called How to Save a Planet, and they were weighing up, the pros and cons of individual responsibility versus systemic change, and does individual choice and responsibility to actually make a difference. And they were they're coming to this conclusion that, yes, it does, in that it has the most effect when our individual choices initiate conversations around climate issues. I thought that was really interesting. It's not the behavior, but the kind of, then when we start to integrate those ideas, can connect to wider communities, that's when it starts to have that ripple effect of, like you're saying, changing the market, and kind of making those, pushing for, demanding those larger changes.
Yeah, I agree with that, and that it's small actions can help, but it really needs to be a whole change in the mindset and the system of how things are thought about and how things are produced and how markets are established.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, she writes really clearly. It's so nice to kind of read that. When I think when I start to think about like climate issues and climate crisis, it can feel like overwhelming in scope. It's happening on, like, if you think about the Stockholm Resilience Center, the planetary boundaries, they start to break it down in a polar area graph that feels, okay, let me understand the scope of the impact in almost chunks of information that I can visualize, or I can start to grasp. And I think she's doing that, like kind of really explicitly laying things out in what feels really entangled or really muddied. She's kind of making things a little bit clearer, which is, I think, so essential at the moment, that there needs to be a clarity of thought and speaking and writing around this.
Yeah, I really like that as well, that she simplifies it and she turns it into, the government needs to act, we need to act, it has to happen now, it's an emergency. It's just these simple statements that we can all understand and listen to and should be able to listen to.
Yeah. And I think I hadn't, maybe until maybe this specific one, this article, that she was saying, she says, it was on page 327, she says it's just that once these companies are gone, she's talking about these 100 companies that are contributing to 70% of the world's emissions. Once they're gone, another 100 will take their place. Oh no, I'm sorry, I've missed that. But she's talking basically, oh, there it is, on 326. She's saying, I firmly believe the most effective way to get out of the mess is to educate ourselves. And that she's absolutely convinced the moment that we do go into full crisis mode, like you're saying, like into action, that we will consider every possible individual detail, every possible, of this. And for me, that was almost speaking to like that she is still hopeful, like that there is that sense of, she does believe it's possible. She's not just waving a flag or kind of being so vocal, being in this public platform that she's not comfortable in, that she still has a faith or a hope that there is potential for us to collectively change the situation.
Yeah, the education part I find really important. I do model UN as well, so we're discussing these issues in a model sense, as in we're discussing what the solutions could be or should be. But in all these, I often do the environmental committee, and the main thing that everyone is always saying is mass media campaigns and education in schools and introduction of these issues into the curriculum, because it has to be understood on a wider level, and it has to be something that is, people don't have to be taught about, it's in their consciousness. And if they haven't been taught about it, then they need to be introduced to it, because it affects all of us. It's not something we can choose to learn about or not.
Yeah, that's interesting. How is the model UN experience? Are you in it at the moment, or does it reflect the COP? Yeah.
There's conferences every few weeks, so they'll be over the weekend then, and it's the whole, you dress formally, you have the formal language, you speak as if you were in the UN, you represent different countries, and you have to represent the views of the country that you are representing, even if you don't agree with them. But it's all about trying to collaborate and trying to compromise and find solutions together. It's not about them fighting to get each other's views across or fighting to get their ideas put forward. It's all about collaboration.
Yeah. That sounds fascinating. To have to argue a point of view that's completely, or maybe has the potential to be antithetical to what you're thinking or to your own point of view in order to understand it. Yeah.
And it also helps you to understand the different situations, for example, with the leaving people behind in the climate crisis, that for some countries it isn't sustainable to just suddenly move to all hybrid cars, or it isn't sustainable to just cut out oil and gas, because they depend on these, as their economy is built on it. So you're forced to see it from that perspective, that there are different needs and there are different pace of development, but we have to cater to all of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm following kind of COP27. I'm from the States originally. I'm from Florida. So I'm obviously interested in maybe what the US or what Biden has been saying or what he hasn't been saying. And like one of the larger solution, in terms of carbon credits, that developing nations can sell carbon credits, and as a source of income, just seems so absolutely ridiculous in terms of a solution, and being one of the major global contributors to carbon emissions and, kind of users of fossil fuels, to then be positioning the states as a leader, just seems, completely oblivious, not taking into account the developing nations' needs, or how other people, in terms of equity or equanimity, it just seems to be maybe what Greta Thunberg was saying at the last COP26, just like blah blah blah. Like it's so devoid of context and acknowledging of the needs of other countries.
Yeah, completely.
Maybe he should be in Model UN. What else stood out for you in the reading?
The idea of a crisis, that she keeps reiterating in all of her speeches, that we're in a crisis, it's an emergency. Nobody is acting as if it's a crisis. People are acting as if a little action here and there can slow it down, or as if we can choose when it's convenient for us to be more climate friendly or to make climate friendlier choices. But there's no sense of panic, and there's no panic, and there's no sense of it being life or death, because that's what it is.
Yeah. And I think it's so hard as human beings. She talks about that in the intro of the book, that we're kind of our evolutionary bodies, our humanness hasn't caught up with like the advancements in technology and kind of development of our kind of present day selves, that we don't know how to acknowledge a crisis unless it's actually happening immediately in front of us, like a tiger at the cave door or something ridiculous like that. But like that we can't see crisis as immediate danger because of the pace of climate change, that it's happening so slowly, or for the kind of Western worlds, that it's happening elsewhere. It's happening up at the poles, it's happening around the equator, and we hear stories, but like the impacts aren't, even if they are like the flooding or the storms that we might be experiencing seasonally, it doesn't feel yet as a crisis. We're kind of slowly adapting to a new normal. I thought that was No, sorry, go ahead.
And for us, it's a luxury to have a hybrid car, or to buy vegetables instead of buying packaged food. But it isn't. They're already seeing the effects in so many countries, and it's already changing their lives, and they already are forced to change.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, not to kind of dip into the other texts but like when it was talking about the things that you can do, the take the jump, like end the clutter, keeping electronic products for at least 7 years. Even that comes with, I think, like a privilege, in that if you have to have something that lasts that long, you have to buy a high quality. And even just the initial capital output of buying a really good toaster or a really good kettle or something like that, you can't always afford, the $120 euro toaster as opposed to like the 20 euro one, like even just to get, and so maybe your 20 euro one breaks sooner because, like there's so much like I totally agree with that, but I was very aware of who she was talking to then in the text. Like I was kind of like, okay, like this is, and then I started kind of flipping through and I was like, oh God, is this whole book is geared. No, and I haven't read it, but the little bits, it is quite geared toward a certain audience.
Yeah.
And it leaves out, I think, like as much as I love Greta Thunberg, I think one of the things that kind of I take issue with is this idea of we need to do this. And I like it in terms of the collectivity that she's including us, and like we need to think together. But it very much, it doesn't, from my perspective, it doesn't include like an Indigenous perspective, or it doesn't include a perspective of nations or communities that haven't contributed to this. Like the statistics that in other parts of the world have fraction points of a percentage of contributing to carbon offsets and carbon emissions, they don't need to be included in this we. And I think that assuming when they get rolled into that, it takes a little bit of the nuance out of the conversation. And what's wrong with pointing fingers very directly and not saying, like we in the Western, or we in the global North, and like, I know a lot of that language does get folded in, but maybe it could be a little bit more direct sometimes.
Yeah, because we do know where the problems lie and where the vast majority of this is coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know, like it is a tricky line then, because obviously we don't want to alienate people. You don't, like, shame and guilt only get you so far. Like even, yeah, like it's, people need to be made uncomfortable to an extent of being able to change without being like shamed about particular behaviors, or without being directed to apply a kind of a framework or a blanket approach to things. Well, do this, and this, or you're not a good human being, or you don't care about climate, things like that. So I think it can be a fine line when being really direct, and kind of urging maybe the global North to take a little bit more responsibility, and alienating people on the flip side of the coin. I had, there's another point. I don't know if you've come across Rebecca Solnit. She's, I was reading this book, Hope in the Dark. And just when I was reading of Kate Rayworth's text and talking about market systems and kind of how so much of our individual consumer choice is driven by, a few men that we'll never meet. And there's this, there's this narrative or this story that's being told about how we consume and how we've decided our choices without even kind of consciously choosing those things. And the problem with market economies and marketing too, and things like that. And if, like, you just bear with me for 1 second, just this one sentence that Rebecca Solnit writes, she says, most of us would say, if asked, that we live in a capitalist society, but vast amounts of how we live our everyday lives, our interactions with and commitments to family lives, friendships, avocations, memberships in social, spiritual, and political organizations are in essence non-capitalist or even anti-capitalist, full of things we do for free, out of love or on principle. And I think, yeah, that's so true of so much of how I find, like those things are almost just taken for granted, or they're unconscious relationships that we have and we build with community. That it would be great to acknowledge those as kind of systemic to who we are as human beings. That all of those interactions that we have on a daily basis, that we couldn't survive and no society could survive without those, that those are so essential that they almost go unseen or unnoticed or taken for granted a lot of times.
That is true.
I mean, it sounds like you're doing a lot of that within the organizations that you're part of, all that list of kind of volunteering.
Sorry, what do you mean?
Yeah, like the no plastic in the park. Did I get that right? Was that the name
Yeah,
of the
plastic out of the park. Yeah.
plastic out of the park? Yeah, and even Model UN. I mean, those are kind of voluntary, kind of what do I want to devote my time to? There's no
That's true.
expectation, of like kind of monetary compensation, but those things are done out of passion and joy.
Yeah, and it's great that we have the opportunity to be involved in it at such a young age, and we can, like, we had these climate meetings in 2019 with Fridays for Future and Extinction Rebellion and all these different groups. We all gathered in Liberty Hall and we were having these conversations about it. And the fact that there's 15 and 16-year-olds who have so much to say about this, and they have such an understanding of the scope of it and the importance of it and what they can do already. They have to, because a lot of the responsibility is with them.
Yeah, but I find it, I don't know, it seems, and you probably hear this a lot, but it's amazing, like issues where like I would find that a lot, like in teaching, like undergraduates as well as graduates, and there's almost like fierceness and a determination that comes with like younger groups, where I feel people that are maybe more my age, like kind of late 30s, early 40s, even 50s, like there's like a scale of like hope and resistance, that kind of trails off as people get older. And that, like, being involved in all of that, having access and understanding all that information, like you're saying, like they have a really deep awareness, scope of the problem, and yet are still acting. They're not, and I'm sure not everybody, like there's points of despair people dip in and out of, or kind of frustration or anger, or even apathy, but like it seems like the group that you guys are building, those groups that you're building together, have this sense of resilience that's just definitely incredible.
And because this is this is going to be our future if we don't do anything. And since we're learning about, in the subjects like CSP, SPHE, politics, this has just become a part of the curriculum now almost, or at least an unspoken part, that it's going to be part of our future and it's going to be a defining issue in the future. And we're learning about it early and earlier, and it's just becoming something that we're not really taking for granted, but just accepting as part of the future.
Yeah. And I think like, it's just remarkable, because even I kind of dip in and I'm like, I can feel so hopeless, or kind of, just despair, like what can we do, what, like where do we go from here, how do you kind of maintain that fierceness in the fight, or that kind of assuredness about your actions that you're taking. It kind of builds up a resistance or a resilience. It seems like that you have a resilience that other people don't have, which is really incredible.
The Kate Raworth.
What stood out for you?
I liked there was a line that sustainable choice has to become the everyday easy option, and it has to be accessible and affordable to all. And like I was saying earlier, it's there's like the culture of just consumption and owning things and possessing more has come to mean that you're more successful and that you're doing better in life. And we need to completely shift that mindset to sustainable, owning what you need, owning what you need and not what you want, and what you can survive with in a comfortable way. But we've lost touch even with what that is that we need.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like kind of we're living, I'm sure you've seen those models where like you kind of input major choices you've made over a year, and it gives you a sense of kind of how many planets you would need in order to meet your consumption patterns, rather than living on a single human scale. We're living on a 2.5 human scale or like a 3 human scale that we're kind of consuming based on the needs or what the planet can support on that kind of global scale. Yeah. It's a big shift, isn't it? And I find even larger corporations kind of greenwashing a lot of that and offering a sustainable choice, that the choices aren't in and of themselves truly sustainable. Like, yes, just different corporations that greenwash. Oh, bring your clothes in and we'll give you €5 off your next purchase. Like you bring your old clothes in, we'll recycle them, and this tag says this is made with recycled polyester or whatever. But they don't kind of talk about those waste streams, but it feels quite tokenistic in the options that we are being given.
Yeah, I really liked what she was saying about the clothes, just the clothes industry in general, that it's had such a massive change from being 4 seasons of products to 52 seasons in fast fashion companies. And instead of their idea now of combating that is just making a few items of clothing renewable or making a few of them recycled, and they still have 52 cycles of clothes that they're putting out and they're producing and they're creating waste from.
Yeah, and I find so much of this, I don't know if it's intentional, I haven't really looked into it, but like this kind of built-in obsolescence where you're almost kind of like clothes just fall apart. They don't last. Like I would have sweaters that have, that my mother would have given to me and I can still wear them, but like with the sweaters that she wore, so like 50-year-old sweaters, but there's no way that the sweater that I bought 2 years ago is going to last 50 years, without obvious repairs. But like these wool sweaters that I have from her they still exist and they're fine and they're functional and they keep me really warm. Like that kind of built-in obsolescence, I feel like, it's kind of happened a lot behind the scenes that we're not aware of that, but it's just we're left with the evidence of those practices, which feels really unfair that we're not part of.
I wear my mom's old clothes and old sweaters as well, and with your own, then even if they don't fall apart, it's still the cycles of what's fashionable, and within a few weeks it's not, you shouldn't be wearing this, you should be wearing this, and this is the new season, so you should wear this, and that color's out of style, so you wouldn't really wear it anymore. So you're only getting a few months of wear out of everything.
Yeah. And it's really seductive, like in terms of like color or design, and like you can see like, I think what you were alluding to, like we've almost been conditioned in that sense.
We don't even realize anymore how extreme it is.
Yeah. We just have 1 minute. Could I just leave us maybe with something positive? I don't know if you've come across her, but Dr. Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson, she talks about, I'll just share my screen really quickly. She talks about climate action, like what brings you joy, what's the work that needs doing, and what you're good at, and like finding your climate action within that kind of center Venn diagram. If you haven't come across it yet, or for I suppose anybody listening in on this conversation, I find it really inspiring when all of that information can be a little bit overwhelming. Like, okay, how do we move forward, or what can we do? But I see Maeve is just letting us know now that we are wrapping up. Nakai, it was really lovely to talk to you and to kind of hear about all the work you're doing.
Same for you.
Yeah, thank you for kind of taking that avant-garde, for climate change.
Yeah. Thank you so much.